On March 11, 2011, northeastern Japan was struck by one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. The magnitude 9.0 quake triggered a massive tsunami that reached the Pacific coastline within minutes, sweeping away entire towns and causing unprecedented destruction. The hardest hit areas were the prefectures of Iwate, Miyagi, and Fukushima, where the waves pushed deep inland and devastated coastal communities. In this video, we will look at real footage from some of the places that were hit the hardest, including cities such as Sendai, Kesunuma, Ishinomaki, Rikuzentakata, and Minamisoma. These scenes show the raw power of the tsunami and the scale of the disaster that changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Welcome to the Top Topics channel.
The first place we visit is a small port community, the town of Chikei on the Imo Peninsula. The Imo Peninsula is known for significant help of preventing the destruction of the town of Miyako, which is covered by the peninsula. However, the communities there were hit very hard and the biggest Japan's waves ever were recorded. In some places exceeded even 40 meters. Chikei fishing port is located in a narrow bay of the fjord type, which has significantly enhanced the effect of the tsunami. In the notorious shots from 2011, you can see a cozy port town, which was completely engulfed by the tsunami. And even after 10 years, the city is a thing of the past, and no recovery is planned. The only building that has been built since that time is this small fish processing factory. Most people refuse to return to their original homes after the terrible experience of tsunami. As you can see, the only buildings that remain are in sufficient altitude where the wave did not get. The destructive force of tsunami reached roughly to these places. There was nothing left on the way further to the ocean. As you can see, a new bridge is being built here and the work in general is continuing on the restoration of the subsoil and tributaries so that any additional wave is absorbed as best as possible. Interesting is this concrete structure, which was the only one to survive the tsunami. So here we are by the ocean. As you can see, the port has been restored and the fishing industry is now up and running. This wall is the only passive protection against the next wave, but it is obvious that it provides protection only against smaller waves. In the case of the same wave as the one in 2011, there will be no stone unturned again up to a height of 35 meters. Which was the height of the wave that struck here. We will go slowly further, just for curiosity. Notice the mountains on the horizon, which is another peninsula called Funakoshi. Which together with the Imo Peninsula forms a deep bay, which hides relatively large city of Yamada. Yamada was also significantly damaged by the tsunami. Unfortunately, there was also a strengthening of the wave, which caused overflow of the protective walls. The last place we're gonna visit in the Miyako area is the city of Taro, which is one of the symbols of the horrible tsunami in 2011. The city boasted a really large and effective protective ramparts against tsunami waves. Unfortunately, the wave in 2011 not only overflowed these ramparts, but also significantly destroyed them. The ensuing flood literally washed away the city. The wave came in this direction, then crashed into the opposite mountain and bounced off the city with full force. The reflected waves tend to be tremendous, as there is a tremendous accumulation of energy in such a narrow space. The city had no chance. As you can see, today there is a new, higher and better designed wall, which should reflect most of the big waves. Only the production and processing plants were rebuilt, and as you can see, a solar power plant was built in a large part of the former city. Miki Endo was born on July 18, 1986 in Chizugawa, Motoyoshi County, near Minami-Sanriku. She has always wanted to work as prevention and protection worker, so she started a vocational school in Sendai. On her mother's recommendation, she subsequently got a job at Shizugawa City Hall in Miyagi Prefecture, given that the city of Shizugawa was often damaged by the tsunami. There was great interest in establishing a disaster prevention department. Following the merger of the city of Shizugawa in October 2005 with the city of Minami-Sanriku, Crisis Management and Prevention Division was newly established. Miki Endo was assigned to this Crisis Management Division in April 2010, less than a year before the catastrophic event in Tohoku. Overall, in the field of disaster prevention, she worked for 4 years before becoming the victim of devastating tsunami. On Friday, March 11, 2011, Miki Endo, like every other day, went to work. She was nervous because the Tohoku area had been hit the previous day by a stronger 7.2 magnitude earthquake. Although it did not cause the seabed to rise, she still remembered the recent warning from scientists at the University of Tokyo. They said that Japan will soon face a huge earthquake, which will be preceded by a similarly strong tremors. Although the working day was almost routine and the information of the previous earthquake was evaluated, the bad feeling didn't leave Miki, and rightly so. At 1446 Japanese time, 130 kilometers from the southeast coast of the Oshika Peninsula in Miyagi Prefecture, at a depth of 24 kilometers, there was a massive release of accumulated energy of magnitude 9.0, which became known as the largest earthquake in the history of Japan, and the third strongest earthquake in human history. The city of Minami Sanriku felt the tremors very strongly, as it was one of the closest cities to the epicenter of the earthquake. When the tremors stopped after many minutes, Miki knew what it meant and immediately ran to an alert system connected to loudspeakers spread throughout the city, and began urging the entire population of the city to evacuate immediately to the surrounding hills.
10メートル以上の津波が押し寄せています。高台へ避難してください。ただいま、宮城県内に10メートル以上の津波が押し寄せています。
According to the strength of the tremors, she had a hunch that the tsunami would be here very quickly, and that it would be unusually large. And indeed, within minutes, the water in the local harbor began to rise inconspicuously. At that moment, thousands of residents of the city hurried to the elevated places. Miki continued to report from the second floor of the city building, even though she had already completed her duty and was still able to evacuate successfully. The water quickly spilled over the harbor walls and began to roll uncontrollably through the city streets. Miki continued to report. Within minutes, the office building was trapped by flowing water. It was too late for any evacuation, and so the last moment of her life, Miki devoted herself to continue warning the townspeople who still had time to flee. Suddenly something unseen happened. Suddenly, something unseen happened. A second, much more destructive wave rolled over the city, reaching the height of the tallest buildings. Cities were literally washed away from the ground. Only 11 out of 40 people from the office building were rescued from the roof of the building where they climbed high antennas. Miki wasn't among them. Miki Endo's body was found by a search team on April 23, 2011. More than a month after the disaster in Shizugawa Bay, near where she spent her childhood. From the City Hall building, only the steel skeleton remained, and most of the city disappeared from the Earth's surface. But the heroic deed of Miki Endo was not forgotten. 6 months after the earthquake, Yoshihiko Noda, former Prime Minister of Japan, said, "There is something we must never forget in the midst of this national crisis. It is the noble spirit of the Japanese people, manifested in despair from the great earthquake." Miki Endo was not interested in her own life and maintained a sense of mission. The following year, in 2012, her story was published in the moral teaching material used in public elementary, high school, and college in Saitama Prefecture, entitled The Voice of an Angel, as a story that teaches a sense of mission and spirit that contributes to society. The Minami Sanriku City Council has agreed to preserve the torso of the City Hall building as a memento of earthquake remnants, in memory of the brave woman Miki Endo, the savior of thousands of fellow citizens. Miki Endo, who planned to marry her boyfriend in September 2011 and still sacrificed her life for others. We will not forget. The coast of this area is very rugged and is made up of numerous fjord-type bays, which has often led to an incredible intensification of the effects of the tsunami, which has caused really great damage. Let's have a look more specifically. We will start near the city of Yamada, which we discussed in the previous part. As you can see, between Yamada Bay and Funakoshi Bay lies this inconspicuous strait of solid land, nestled between the Funakoshi Peninsula and the Japanese mainland. This narrow strip of land was completely flooded in 2011 by a wave that flowed in from Yamada Bay. Due to low elevation, the water flowed into Barakushi Bay without any obstructions and completely devastated this picturesque valley. We are on a newly built breakwater, and what we see in front of us is Yamada Bay. The town of the same name is located here. As you can see, the new breakwater is built very robustly and should reflect a wave of a similar magnitude as in 2011. Theoretically, in 2011, protection was minimal and therefore there was complete devastation. Only buildings at the foot of the hill were not affected. As you can see, the elevation of the whole area is increasing here, as in many other places in Japan affected by tsunami in 2011. Buildings are being built in these elevated places, which are thus much better protected. The whole operation is unbelievable, especially from a logistical point of view, as tens of trucks, millions of tons of material are transported from the inland. In this way, the altitude of the original space rises by up to 15 meters. When we look behind these fences bordering the construction of this magnificent work, we still see the remnants of the destructive force of the tsunami. Also on the other side of the strait at Funakos Bay, the construction of a new protective wall continues. We will now move to the other side of Funakoshi Bay, to the part called Namita Beach. This whole area, as you can see, is exposed to the open ocean. Unfortunately, there was virtually no passive protection in the form of ramparts. Therefore, there was an enormous intensification of the effects of the tsunami, which manifested itself here as a rapidly rising level. These pines you see here form the only natural wall that reached up to this hill. Most of them were destroyed by the massive outflow of the water that occurred after the tsunami. Here you can see that there has already been an increase in elevation and the introduction of a large amount of soil and subsequent new construction. From the original town, there is basically nothing left. As you can see, the outflow of water was really enormous and destructive. Notice these hills. Behind them is another bay called Otsuchi Bay, after the city of the same name that used to be there. Let's take a look there. As you can see, the bay is very large. The wave came from this direction, around the lighthouse, the destruction of which is notorious and was captured in many videos in 2011. As you can see, the new lighthouse is already standing here. Although the tsunami didn't look extremely dangerous at first, it eventually gained incredible power and literally erased the city from the map. The degree of destruction was indeed enormous, and Otsuchi is clearly one of the most affected cities in 2011. Here you see the appearance of the city several years after the disaster. Almost all the buildings are gone, only the empty area overgrown with grass. Sometimes you only see the demolished torso of the building, which the wave could not completely destroy. Most of them were massive reinforced concrete structures. Looking at these buildings is a frightening idea of what the wave must have had. As elsewhere in the affected areas, reconstruction work is progressing here, and again, also increasing the elevation of the terrain. The main weakness of the city were the relatively low breakwaters, which the wave easily overcame. As you can see, new, much larger breakwaters are being completed today, which should bring the desired protection to the city. As proof that the city is beginning to revive, it is also the fact that in this part of the city, very close to the ocean, these industrial enterprises were built. It seems that the city of Otsuchi has a future, and despite its dark chapter in history, it eventually moves and rises from the ashes, like a legendary phoenix. The first and fundamental reason why the city of Kesenuma, as well as the whole area, was hit hard is the location of the city. The city lies directly opposite the epicenter of the earthquake, where energy was released at the tectonic fault and the seabed was raised. This fact and the distance of the city, only 65 miles from the epicenter, was enough indication that the tsunami would strike the city very strongly and very quickly. Another reason is that the entire northern area of Miyagi Prefecture, where the city is located, has sunk slightly into earth crust by as much as 3/4 of a meter, which has significantly facilitated the spread of the tsunami. When we look closely at the structure of the coast, you would maybe think that the city was well protected by the deep bay in which it is located, and also by the island of Oshima. But as well known, it is in the deep bays that the effects of the tsunami are greatly enhanced, as the tsunami from the open sea is pushed into a narrow space, which begins to accumulate a large amount of energy in the wave that would otherwise spill over. In addition, the overall duration of the tsunami is significantly extended. The wave manifests itself as a flood of furiously flowing and rapidly rising water. The town of Kesenuma was damaged by the existence of the island of Oshima, as a strong current was pushed into these two narrow bays, and just before the city merged into one single stream that invaded the city, like when two huge and flooded great rivers come together. The wave spread along the path of least resistance, the Okawa River, and also to the local port. At first, the situation didn't look dangerous, and the river and the deep bay were able to absorb the first surges of water. However, the flow of water was still growing, and moreover, after the flooding of the port, the water had nowhere to spread. This narrow valley functioned as a plug, and all the mass of water immediately began to spread across this peninsula, on which stood the city center. Then something happened that was fatal for the city of Kesennuma, as well as for the city of Minami-Sanriku, Onagawa, and Rikuzen Takata. The second, much more destructive wave came, which accomplished the work of destruction. This wave has long been speculated because it was so large that it broke long before the coast, and the witnesses described it in the afflicted towns only as a sudden increase in the flow of water and a rise in the water level. Recently, however, a unique video has seen the light of day from the town of Kesennuma, where this huge wall of water was captured. What you are about to see is a wave of destruction, which was located only for this area and which, according to scientists from the University of Tokyo, comes from a different source than the wave that hit the entire coast of Japan. Research continues, but we know this was just another reason why the area has been so badly damaged. As the wave spilled far in front of the shore and flowed into the city in the form of a raging flood, the water immediately flowed across the peninsula, merging with the current in the Okawa River, creating a terrifying spectacle. Within minutes, the city center was completely washed away, and the tsunami showed its incredibly destructive power. The whole destruction of the city was completed by a huge fire, which arose in the refineries of petroleum products, of which there were several in the city. It was one of the most devastating fires in the history of Japan. The next day, only debris remained from the city. The balance was frightening, nearly 1,500 dead and billions of dollars in damage. As you can see, the renewal of the city is still going on today, especially in the area of the peninsula. The recovery will take many more years, but progress is still visible after 10 years. The elevation of the space is artificially increased, as in other cities, so that any further wave will not cause such damage. When the tremors were over, I ran in shock on the road uphill outside the city and didn't look back. From an early age, we were taught what to do in the event of an earthquake. The trees flickered and I ran on and on. Then I stopped and heard a sound. Cracking, breaking, distant rumbling. I was paralyzed. I turned and ran back down to the city. The trees parted and the scenery I saw was etched in my memory forever. I saw the wreckage, the sea of wreckages. Everywhere the eye could see, nothing but debris. The city is gone. The city of Rikuzen Takata, my home, has disappeared from the face of the earth. This is the statement of a direct witness to the event who contacted us some time ago. Knowing our content, he wanted to share his experience. He refused to publish his real name, so let's call him Mr. Hirota. And so the idea arose for a separate video, which is dedicated to the city of Rikuzen Takata, a city that ceased to exist physically on March 11th, 2011. Perhaps all the circumstances that led to this tragic moment conspired against the city. As we mentioned in the last video, the city lies in this gigantic bay, which was directly exposed to the epicenter of the earthquake. This bay itself is further fragmented into various smaller bays and coves. And last but not least, the whole closest area to the epicenter has lowered massively, which has facilitated the spread of the tsunami. If we take a closer look, you can see that the city lies in a narrow bay, which also narrows slightly towards the city, which caused the effect of a narrow throat and a huge accumulation of a tsunami energy. Plus, the bay is directly exposed to the open sea. There is no natural barrier that would at least slightly reduce the effects of the tsunami. In addition, the whole city lies in a relatively flat wide and long floodplain, with a minimum of higher points. As confirmed by research, the surroundings of the city and the city itself has lowered the most after the earthquakes below the ocean level, in places by up to 3/4 of a meter. Add to that the undersized and low breakwaters, which could not even slow down the tsunami, and we have a completely deadly cocktail of factors that inevitably led to the destruction of the city. Due to the absolute destruction of the city, a small number of witness videos have been preserved. There was simply no one to make these videos. However, relatively unique shots were captured on the Hirota Peninsula, around which the wave to the town of Rikuzentakata passed. From these shots, it is clear that with this enormous rise in ocean level, nearby Rikuzentakata had no chance to stand against it. Right in the city, the fire brigade, which patrolled the port, managed to capture short videos. These videos show an extremely rapid rise in water level, followed by a panicked flight of firefighters as they understand the danger of the situation. Subsequently, they managed to capture a few unique shots of the destruction of the city from a higher place, where they managed to go. Within minutes, the city was demolished. There was really just an ocean of wreckages left behind, which offered a really scary spectacle. Thanks to the low ridge of the city, large sea lagoons were maintained here for many months. Later they were labor dried. The size of the destroyed area is really shocking and beyond human comprehension. What happened here must have been real hell. The wave reached with its destructive force all the way around the Kesan River, which is about 3 miles from the ocean shore. Overall, the damage was enormous. Over 1,700 people died, which was 10% of the city's population. Property damage was in the billions of dollars. Mr. Hirota lost part of his family and also a few friends. After being evacuated, he decided not to return. On the one hand, there was nowhere to go, and moreover, the terrifying experience to which he was subjected would never disappear from his mind, and he couldn't imagine living where he would be exposed to the constant fear of another horrible wave. However, the city itself is experiencing a lively construction industry. The main goal of the builders is to increase the whole space, so the next wave has much harder opportunities to spread. This is happening in most of the affected areas by the tsunami in 2011. But here, in Rikuzentakata, this activity is taking place in a particularly magnificent form. The whole city is gradually increasing by an incredible 15 meters. This is an insanely large logistics engineering project, where a huge amount of soil is brought from the inland, which is then spread by construction machinery. Only after that they are able to construct new buildings. What is definitely worth noting is the new breakwater, which was recently completed. Its dimensions are truly impressive. The height of the new rampart is 42 feet, which is slightly more than the height of the wave in 2011. This imposing structure, just behind the breakwater, is the Iwate Tsunami Memorial Museum, the main museum of the entire catastrophe in Iwate Prefecture, which is to commemorate the horrors of the catastrophe at the time, the memory of the victims, the reconstruction process, and other important contexts. It is a truly breathtaking architecture design. Now, let's start where we left off in the last episode, and that is in the big bay near the city of Otsuchi. On the other side of the bay is the first part of the city of Kamaishi, called Shiritsu. Just like the city of Otsuchi, all the buildings here were erased from the face of the earth. There was also a sudden flood that quickly flooded the city, uprooting the pines that served as a natural rampart. The breakwater was insufficient, which caused really big damage. However, the lesson was learned, and as you can see, the new breakwater is very robust and high, especially when we compare it with the original one, which can be seen on the left. The difference is really striking. The whole city agreed on the same strategy as the city of Fudai once did, the construction of a massive wall. Thanks to this, there is no significant increase in terrain, as in other areas. But now let's move on. We are going to fly over these hills, which form the Hakozaki-cho Peninsula, and which separates Otsuchi Bay from Ryoishi Bay. Ryoishi Bay is relatively small compared to other bays in the area. At its end was the district of the same name, Ryoishi. The word "was" is entirely appropriate, because after the tsunami there was literally nothing left but a pile of rubble. It was the narrow profile of the bay that intensified the effects of the tsunami. The bay ended with a small port, which was bordered by a wall approximately 10 meters high. Buildings were hidden behind it. When the wave came, it manifested itself again as a rapidly rising flood. The whole port was filled with water relatively quickly, similar to filling up a swimming pool, a giant pool. The harbor walls first began to overflow and then succumbed to the tremendous water pressure. The walls collapsed and the water literally scattered the neighborhood to dust. As you can see, today the wall around the harbor is being restored, but with one big difference. There will no longer be any residential buildings behind the walls, and the whole district has moved hundreds of meters inland, where the whole valley is increased in places by up to 15 meters. What you see is an incredible engineering work, where the landscape was completely transformed. The buildings that will one day stand here should certainly not be reached by another wave. Now we move through this massif, which represents the Kamaishi Peninsula, and behind which is the bay and the city of the same name. As you can see, the bay is very large, and on its shores there are several port communities. The industrial city of Kamaishi lies exactly at the narrow end. New breakwaters were built at the estuary of the bay, because the original ones were swept away. However, this solution is only to break the wave. The purpose is not to stop it. In the case of a large wave, their effect on stopping the water is minimal. We are now in the port area, where the wave entered the city. It was all captured from this building. Over here, the force of the water was so enormous that the whole port district disappeared, except for the large concrete buildings. Tsunami also recorded from these elevated terraces on the surrounding hills, where a large part of the population went during the evacuation. As you can see, there is a gradual renewal here. but unlike other cities, there is no significant increase in terrain. Several concrete buildings withstood the tsunami here, while smaller brick and wood buildings were scattered. The future tsunami protection strategy in this area is therefore different. Other very durable concrete buildings, most probably industrial ones, that will withstand the tsunami will be built here. No small residential buildings. That means that in the case of a wave, people could hide on the roofs or on higher floors, which ensures safe survival. An interesting strategy and very different from other cities. The city center itself was very seriously damaged. But what was a great advantage for Kamaishi is that there were also many concrete buildings, which significantly slowed down the tsunami and spilled it into the streets, so the water lost most of its energy. This place is notorious, and there has been a flood of many lighter buildings from the city center. As you can see, the concrete buildings are still standing, and this is the path that Kamaishi will continue to take. The city returned to life relatively quickly. What is certainly worth mentioning is the removal of debris, which was logistically very demanding, because many debris was wedged in the streets of the city, which remained due to its structure.
Ofuneto is located almost exactly in the center of the mountainous area bounded by Miyako to the north and Onagawa Harbor to the south. Just 50 miles from the epicenter of the March 11, 2011 earthquake, and was subjected to the direct effect of the tsunami waves. Cities in this mountainous area were the most affected by the tsunami. There are several reasons for this, which I will explain to you. The first is that the bathymetry of the coastal waters is characterized by a steep rise in the seabed just offshore. As a result, the wave was able to reach the shores completely unnoticed and without any loss of energy. The second reason is that the whole area is characterized by deep funnel-shaped bays, which means that these bays gradually narrow towards the shore. As a result, the water is forced into these bays with tremendous force. And at the same time, due to the narrow profile of the bay, there is a strong upwelling of up to several tens of meters. This happens very subtly at first with the gradual rise of the water level in the harbor, followed by overflow of the dikes and gradual flooding of the surrounding infrastructure and buildings. In the final stage, the crest of the wave is pushed into the bay and a very rapid catastrophic flood occurs, devastating everything. At this stage, the water level can peak at up to 100 feet. The third and least known reason is that the tsunami was made up of two completely different waves, each with its source at a different fault location. Unfortunately, in the case of this mountainous region, the two waves were combined, as you can see in the animation, to produce an enormously destructive wave that was beyond anything the Japanese had expected. Note that with this double wave, neither the north nor the south of the affected area was affected, only the mountainous center. Elsewhere, two large waves hit the shore, which was also destructive as we saw in the last video in the Noda area, but not as much as when these waves merged. And that's exactly what happened in the town of Ofuneto. As you can see, the town is just a short distance from the town of Rikuzentakata, separated only by this mountain range. This means that the wave that reached the coast was of the same character. However, Rikuzentakata is completely open to the ocean and lies at the end of the fairly wide bay. Ofuneto Bay, by the contrast, is hidden behind a wall of hills, and the town may appear to be sufficiently sheltered, but the opposite was true. You know from what we've seen that this is just the perfect combination to amplify the effects of the tsunami that is forced into this narrow space. The first video we are going to look at uniquely captures the arrival of the wave at the edge of the bay, which is bounded by two stone jetties. Note the fishing boats trying to make a last-minute escape from the harbor to the open sea. Some succeed, but unfortunately, others are no longer able to beat the strong current and are pulled back into the harbor. It is very clear to see that the wave is not manifested by any wall of water, but by a gradual upwelling of the entire surface of the adjacent ocean and the gradual pushing into the harbor. It is clear from other shots that the wave initially manifested itself very slightly into the harbor as a slowly rising water surface. But this began to change into a dramatic spectacle within minutes as more and more water was pushed into the narrow bay. The danger of the situation is clear, for example in this footage where very heavy steel containers can be seen being carried away by the water as if they were made of paper. Within a few minutes, the water was very aggressively destroying absolutely everything in its path and began to carry away buildings without any problems. The level thus gradually rose to 35 feet of strong flowing water, which meant the destruction of most of the city and the destruction of everything not more than 35 feet in height. Through the channel of Sakari River, the water penetrated deep inland to the confluence with the Tatsukon River, where the water finally lost its energy and began to flow back into the ocean. And this was the second act of the whole disaster, because the backflow of the water was absolutely extreme in the town of Ofuneto. And what the wave itself did not destroy, the backflow of the water perfected and washed away. In some places in the bay, the water reached up to 80 feet, especially in this area called Masichaku, which is on the edge of the bay. In this unique footage, you can see the terrifying outflow of a huge mass of water back into the ocean. The city was virtually destroyed and is one of the worst affected ever. The lack of effective breakwaters and barriers, which were virtually non-existent before 2011, was a big part of that. The local authorities have learned a big lesson from this event, and you can see in these images that they have taken the rebuilding of the city very seriously. The construction of a massive tsunami wall that closed off the entire bay and separated the city from the harbor was an incredible feat of engineering. The wall is designed to withstand the wave even 6 feet higher than the one in 2011. It is an incredible feat, a system that should protect the residents of this hard-pressed city once and for all from the vagaries of the Pacific Ocean. The Japanese have managed to close any loophole here, and the wave should naturally peak behind these waters and return to the ocean without any major damage. The mouth of the Sakari River, whose bed has been concreted and elevated, is to serve as a safety valve so that the water will flow upriver and there should be no danger of overtopping the breakwater in the city. Hopefully a similar event will not happen again and the city will succeed in its fight with nature next time.
The town of Onagawa is nestled in a deep, funnel-shaped bay surrounded by high hills. The city itself was not directly exposed to the epicenter of the earthquake and is sheltered by this mountain. However, the epicenter is only a few tens of kilometers away, so that the energy of the tsunami when it reached the shores was enormous, as we know, for example, from what happened in Tsunami. The location of the city in a deep bay is rather a disadvantage, because the water will be drawn into a narrow space, which greatly amplifies the effects of the wave. In the town itself, a witness managed to record a unique video showing the behavior of tsunamis in deep bays. The video shows the water rising steadily, but not aggressively, up to 65 feet, the level of the top floors of buildings. Then the tide stops and water remains remarkably calm. And then the destruction of the city comes in the form of a sudden rush of water back into the ocean. Here, on this building, you can see the limit of the moisture, how far the rising water reached before it began to recede. The consequences for the city were catastrophic, with the destruction of even strong concrete buildings and the washing away of most structures. The only place that remained protected was this high mound on which the local hospital is located. This gave Japanese engineers guidance on how to proceed with the reconstruction of the affected areas, and similar protective solutions are being built in many places. As you can see, here in the north, the wave has reached up to these places, which means that if the wave had a few meters higher reach, it would have spilled over the highest point of the mountain and flooded the residential areas that extend all the way to Mangakur Bay. Fortunately, this didn't happen, and the neighborhood was therefore unaffected because, as you can see, Mangakur Bay itself is very well protected, and the tsunami had minimal effects there, as can be seen in the buildings, which, even in the immediate vicinity of the sea, remained almost untouched. To the east, the town was damaged approximately 1.5 miles from the harbor, which is clearly visible from an aerial view. The original buildings in this area were completely destroyed and washed away, and also here the Japanese applied an interesting solution. The original buildings here were quickly replaced by these container houses, which can be built in a very short time. Other parts of this area are still deserted, and in places there is ongoing reconstruction. As you can see here, even the shops here are housed in containers, which may seem inconvenient, but it is an effective solution, and it seems that this type of construction will continue to gain ground, because in the event of another wave of destruction, everything can be rebuilt relatively quickly. Returning to the harbor itself, the most remarkable fact is that there has not yet been any construction of a protective breakwater. There are reasons for this. Such a wall would have to be at least 100 feet high to have the necessary effect, but the locals couldn't imagine such a concrete monster and rejected this solution. Instead, other interesting solutions are being pursued. The whole area, away from the harbor, is being massively raised, and only on these raised platforms will buildings be constructed. The next wave will therefore bypass the new buildings. In the immediate vicinity of the sea, only industrial and warehouse buildings, which can be easily rebuilt, will be placed. There will be no residential buildings here in the future, thus minimizing the possible loss of life. Onagawa, in short, has chosen an interesting path after its tragic experience. Another interesting testimony of the effects of the tsunami in the area comes from the fishing town of Agatsusho, which lies on the right bank of the beginning of the deeper Ogatsu Bay. Also here, the video shows the sudden impact of the tsunami in the form of an unexpected rise in sea level. The fate of the local communities and small harbors was similar to that of Onagawa. Very few buildings remain in place, and even the town of Kamiogatsu, at the very end of the bay, didn't survive the tsunami. Even the strong concrete buildings were significantly damaged, as seen in this landmark building that was demolished years ago. As you can see, unlike Onagawa, here they decided to build a massive concrete breakwater to stop a wave like the one in 2011. A massive steel gate will be built here at this point, so the city should be completely safe, which is further secured by raising the ground above ocean level. In this episode, we bring you another story from those times. It took place in the area of Ishinomaki, where we are currently in the wake of the Japanese tsunami. It's the story of two friends, Yoshio and Akemi, who were forever separated at the time by the devastating wave. They both lived in a small community on the coast called Okawa. It lay in a forgotten corner of Japan, under the hills and among the rice paddies, on the border between modern Japan and the mysterious northern regions. Yoshio and Akemi both attended the same school in Okawa, which was located over 200 miles north of the Tokyo gigapolis, on the banks of the great Kitakami River, which, 2 miles from the school, flows into the Pacific Ocean. The Kitakami is the main river draining the northern region of Japan, known since ancient times as Tohoku, the infamous frontier realm of barbarians, mythical orcs, and bitter cold. Even today, it remains a remote, marginal place, a symbol of rural tradition that is but a folk memory to the inhabitants of distant cities. On Friday, classes at the Okawa school were due to finish at 2:30 p.m. Outside, the school bus was already waiting, with several younger students already waiting inside. The older pupils, that means most of the children, including Yoshio and Akemi, were still finishing up their school duties that day in their classrooms. At that moment, an earthquake struck. Yoshio remembers that it wasn't the classic tremors he was used to, where everything rattled and bounced. This time, it was different. The room slowly shifted back and forth a few meters, and an eerie rumbling sound came from within the earth. Yoshio remembers. It seemed gigantic. Teachers were running up and down, shouting, "Hold on to your desks!" Yoshio was worried about his friend Akemi and asked him, "Hey, this is big. Are you okay?" When it stopped, the teacher said, Follow me outside." So we all put on our helmets and went outside. The school building was evacuated with exemplary speed. Barely 5 minutes after, the students ducked under their desks. They were on the playground, lined up by grades and wearing hard plastic helmets. Girls from the lower grades were crying. Other students were showing something like earthquake sickness and vomiting. Akemi suddenly asked Yoshio, "I wonder if there will be a tsunami." Yoshio looked up. He remembered his great-grandfather telling him a mysterious story from his youth about the rumbling depth of the earth, followed by a foaming black ocean that took everything. They both ran to the teacher and told him their fears. But he told them not to interfere with the evacuation, which was going exactly according to the manual, and that therefore they had nothing to worry about and not to panic. At that time, at 3:14 p.m., the meteorological agency issued a warning. The tsunami was expected to come at a height of 10 meters. Like many Japanese institutions, the operation of Okawa Elementary School was governed by a manual, and it said, main evacuation site, school grounds, secondary evacuation site in the event of a tsunami, vacant land near the school or park, that is a place just a few meters above the ocean level. It didn't make sense to Yoshio. After all, there are big hills around the school that are so easy to hide in. Plus, there are the school grounds where the students learned how to grow shiitake mushrooms. Everyone knows the area, and it's easy to get there by road. So why do they have to stand on the school grounds? These questions kept running through his mind, and more helplessness began to take hold of him when confronted with the bureaucratic thinking of the school teachers. Yoshio resolutely walked out of the school and shouted loudly, "To the hill! Hill! Everybody run for the hill!" and immediately said to the teacher standing next to him, "If we stay here, the tsunami will engulf us." But the teachers wouldn't hear of it. They argued that in case of further tremors, trees could fall on the children in the forest and that it was safer here. Yoshio and Akemi didn't want to wait any longer and ran towards the hills. Yoshio recalls that one mother tried to convince the teacher that she wanted to go home with her child. She was told, "It's dangerous to go home now, so it's better to stay at school." The mom yelled at the teacher, "They say there's a 10-meter tsunami coming." The teacher replied, "Calm down, ma'am. We know what to do." It was yet another enactment of an ancient narrative whose lines had been written over centuries between the pleading voices of women and the indifferent, imperious refusal of old men. When the earthquake struck and the tsunami warning was subsequently issued, Mr. Yamashita, a man in a grey suit in his 50s, who worked at the local branch of the Ishinomaki municipal government, and 5 of his other colleagues got into 3 cars with roof-mounted loudspeakers and set out to personally deliver the warning to people unaware of the impending disaster. Mr. Yamashita recalls, "We were driving about a mile off the coast and something extraordinary was happening at the point where the sea meets the land. The place was Matsubara, a scythe of fields and sand where a strip of pine forest grew along the beach. The trees were centuries old. Many of them were around 20 meters tall. I could see the white wave foaming over the tops of the trees. It fell over them like a waterfall. And in the other direction, cars were coming and drivers were shouting at us, 'A tsunami is coming, turn around!' So we immediately turned around and went back the way we came." At 3:25 p.m., they drove past the school and shouted their desperate warning from loudspeakers. "The super tsunami has arrived in Matsubara. Evacuate! Evacuate to higher ground!" But on the school playground, teachers were preparing to burn wood in barrels to keep the children warm. They didn't pay any attention to us. But the situation was untenable. Suddenly, the deputy headmaster appeared. "It looks like a tsunami is coming," he called. "Quick, we are going to the traffic island." The traffic island was less than 400 meters away, just outside the village, at the point where the road met the Great Bridge of New Kitakami. As you can see here, this is a spot just a few meters above the surrounding terrain, which then slopes down again. And this is where the teachers would hurt the students instead of immediately fleeing into the nearby hills. It was a trap. It was a fatal and irreversible decision. As the students and teachers approached the traffic island, the impending disaster was revealed to them. A massive mass of water was already flowing down the Kitakami River. The river was full to the brim, and the first splashes of water had already begun to overflow the protective levee. The teachers in the lead froze in the face of the wave. The others, including Yoshi and Akemi, immediately turned. They immediately ran to the hill behind the school. Yoshio turned around and saw that the water was already massively over the mound and rolling in their direction. He had yet to notice that the traffic island, where most of his classmates and teachers were staying, had been covered by the massive blow of another wave and disappeared under the water. They found themselves at the bottom of the hill, in the steepest and most densely wooded part of the slope. At some point, Yoshio realized that Akemi had fallen. He tried to pull his friend up, but failed. Akemi disappeared into the dark water. He scrambled further up the hill. As he did, he looked over his shoulder and saw the dark tsunami rising behind him. It touched his feet. "It felt like a huge gravitational force when it hit me," he said. "It was like someone was pushing me with great force. I couldn't breathe. I was struggling for breath." Then darkness overcame him. It smelled of brine, mud, and seaweed. Suddenly he surfaced, and a force threw him up the slope. He grabbed a tree and stumbled with the last of his strength uphill. He was already out of reach of the raging water that had swallowed everything below him. Exhausted, Yoshio fell on his back, blinded by the mud, and all he could hear was the splashing, rumbling, crunching, and creaking of wood and concrete, metal and tile. He was badly injured, bruised, and temporarily blinded, but he survived. His friend wasn't so lucky. From the 78 students who were there that day, 74 did not survive the event. Of the 11 teachers, only one survived. It took many years for the Japanese authorities to admit wrongdoing in the evacuation of the school. For a long time, those responsible defended themselves, but the faulty manuals and the actions of the school staff were so dramatically wrong that the matter couldn't be covered up. And so, 5 years after the disaster, there was finally, after a long trial, a material compensation for the parents and an admission of guilt by the authorities for the needless death of many children. The school is now a place of pilgrimage, a memorial, and a silent reminder that nature and its forces do not care about any manuals and official procedures. Let this be a legacy for future generations, not only in Japan, but everywhere in the world where people are faced with the power of nature.
The citizens of Otsuchi had thought that their seawall would shield them from a tsunami disaster. A huge cement barrier at this ocean's edge the wall, was built to protect the town from just this kind of calamity. But the wall was just over 30 feet high and the tsunami wave was 50 feet. Unfortunately, the wall took a hit as hard as the town did. A similar fate like Otsuchi met many other cities on the east coast of Japan, with one exception. A few hours' drive up the coast from Otsuchi, in the village of Fudai, residents had complained about their seawall when it was built. They said it was too high and blocked their view. The city of Fudai is located in the area between the cities of Miyako and Kuzi, in places where the tsunami hit particularly hard. The very wave that demolished Otsuchi had barely touched Fudai. One villager said that the only water to touch the town was the spray in the wind. What made the difference? Height. The seawall at Fudai is 50 feet high and could hold back a wave of the same size. Decades ago, towns along the northeast coast of Japan began erecting seawalls to withstand waves of about 30 feet, which was the height of a terrible tsunami that struck in 1933. Kotoko Wamura was the mayor of Fudai when the town began planning its seawall in the 1960s. Wamura had been a young man when the 1933 tsunami wiped out Fudai, and the memories made him determined not to let it happen again. Wamura also remembered family stories about the tsunami of 1896, which had been even bigger, 50 feet. When it came time to draw up the plans for Fudai seawall and later floodgate, Wamura insisted they both be 50 feet high. Many of the villagers were furious, unconvinced. They needed a wall that was so expensive and so ugly, blocking their ocean view. But Wamura wouldn't back down. Fudai got the tallest seawall on the whole northeast coast. Mayor Wamura was not alive to see his wall protect the people who live in its shadow. He died in 1987, but today he is a hero to all of the villagers whose lives he saved.
While the area between the cities of Ishinomaki and Iwaki is defined by flat coastline and shallow sea. From Onagawa City to Miyako City, the coastline is very rugged, filled with large fjord-like bays and a rapid drop-off of the bottom to the depths. However, from Miyako further north, the character of the coastline begins to change visibly. While there is still a rugged and gigantic coastline, and a fairly rapid drop into the deep ocean, the bays are no longer so deep and narrow, but instead are very wide and not very far inland. Due to the great depth of the ocean extending to the very boundaries of the bays, the tsunami could move under the surface up to very close to the coast, similar to the southern fjord area. However, this is where the similarity ends. Due to the wide and open mouths of the bays, the tsunami after entering the bay was able to form impressive walls of water that overflowed very close to the shore, thanks to the sufficient energy that the wave did not lose by rubbing against the bottom. The waves created an unrepeatable and very dangerous spectacle. The first prime example is a wave strike in the Tanohata area, near the settlement of Haketo. The waves came approximately 15 minutes after a big shaking from this southeast direction, from an epicenter 60 miles away. In the northern part of the Broad Bay, the witness was able to get a unique footage from this road on the flyover that is at a sufficient height to not be endangered. The first interesting thing to note is that, unlike the southern areas, there is a fairly large outflow of water. This means only one thing: the wave here did not have the same origin as the wave in the south, but was probably generated by a secondary, more northerly fault that triggered the negative tsunami that always precedes the outflow of water. Here we see the rapid return of water and the relatively rapid filling of the bay with water, typical of this type of tsunami. In this case, the main wave is already very close and will come very suddenly and aggressively. Here you can see very clearly the sample weir that was created between two cliffs. This is formed simply because the tsunami has already reached the bay, but at this point it is unable to overcome the barrier quickly, so it builds up behind the cliffs and the ocean level rises faster than the bay level. However, because the bay is open from the south, the main wave arrives very quickly and forms a large aggressive wall of water that spills over just offshore. This is followed by the classic strong current behind the wavefront, which swallows it up. In photos from 2013, we can see that the wave destroyed the original breakwater and subsequently flooded this entire valley. Unfortunately, the breakwaters in this northern area were very insufficient or virtually non-existent. Based on this experience, a 2 times higher wall was built to withstand the 2011 wave 100%. Interestingly, just a few kilometers to the north in the town of Fudai, which already had massive protection in 2011, making Fudai one of the few towns that remained completely unaffected by the tsunami. The protective wall still stands majestically here and is a silent witness to the terrifying event of 2011. We dedicated a separate episode on our channel to this town and its mayor, Mr. Wamura. You can find the link in the video description. A few kilometers to the north, the situation was reversed. In this giant bay near the area called Noda, there was virtually no protection built, and this had its unfortunate consequences. 2 witnesses filmed the arrival of the wave here in the south, and 2 witnesses here in the north of the bay. Let's go to the 2 south ones first. The first cameraman is standing here on the bridge, and the second one is standing here on this road, right underneath the bridge. If we look at the bridge, we can see the water leaving the harbor just before the wave came in, even from this shot. The camera underneath the bridge captured quite uniquely the formation of a giant wall of water that was about 30 feet high. The surge of the wave is no longer visible from this view, as the cameraman understood the danger he was in and took his feet on his shoulders, which he cannot be blamed for, probably saving his life. Fortunately, the bridge cameraman recorded the surge. What's scary is that even though he was high up on the bridge, the wave reached him and splashed him with water. You can see here that the bridge is high above the ocean level, so the wave was huge. In the northern part of the bay, the cameraman was somewhere on this hill. It is impossible to pinpoint the exact location, but a clue is this old breakwater which is visible in the 2011 video. The video only shows the arrival of the second wave, as the coastline is already flooded after the first wave hit. Nevertheless, this example clearly shows an example of an approaching wave that hits the breakwater with enormous force. To illustrate just how crushing the first wave was, we can look at the last video from behind the breakwater, where we can see the enormity of the tsunami, which easily spills over the breakwater and floods the entire area behind it. After the experience of 2011, a new breakwater has been built, which as you can see is much bigger than the original one and should protect this whole area from a wave similar to the 2011 one. Interestingly, the original breakwater has been preserved and repaired, and so now the bay area is protected by a double wall.
The city of Ishinomaki was located very close to the epicenter of a strong undersea earthquake. The nearby town of Anagawa, which was exposed directly to the source of the powerful tsunami, was completely devastated, as we documented in one of our previous videos. However, the city of Ishinomaki seemed to have an advantageous location as it is located by this magnificent hilly peninsula under the city of Anagawa, which stretches 20 kilometers to the south and thus forms a natural barrier for the city of Ishinomaki. According to all previous predictions, the barrier should have probably dampened even larger tsunami waves. Therefore, the city did not have any special passive protection against wave in a form of massive breakwaters like other cities. This became fatal for the city. A massive horizontal wave that was moving in an east-west direction rubbed against the southern edge of the peninsula and then changed its direction to the north, directly towards the city of Ishinomaki. You know from our videos that this phenomenon is called wave diffraction. Thanks to this phenomenon, the tsunami is able to kill in well-covered bays or on the other side of islands that did not stand in the way of the wave, such as in Sri Lanka in 2004. As the wave was quietly approaching the city's port, Mr. Honda worked as a plumber in a neighboring town 12 kilometers from Ishinomaki. When the earthquake hit, he called his wife who was hiding in a bank and told her to meet her at her house. A tsunami warning was issued a few minutes later. He tried to call his wife again, but the phone lines were dead. Fearing for her safety, Hiroyuki jumped into his car and rushed home to meet her so they could evacuate to higher ground together. Cars drove past him in the opposite direction, making their way to the established evacuation zones. Meanwhile, the wave has already reached the city's port. Due to the diffraction, it manifested as a flood of rippling, raging water that immediately engulfed the harbor quays and piers and began destroying the infrastructure, as you can see in this rare video. Subsequently, the water began to pour into the harbor quarter, where this well-known video was created capturing the arrival of the destructive element through the streets of the city. And just at that same moment, Mr. Honda was approaching the neighborhood where he lived, which is adjacent to the port. Suddenly, he saw what appeared to be a barrier in the distance. As he got closer, he realized that they were cars swept by the wave, bobbing up and down. As he desperately turned the car around, he saw a man trying to escape the rushing water on foot. I pulled him into the car through the window and we drove away. But by that time, the tsunami was already ahead of us, recalls Honda. The water blocked their path and they realized they were trapped. The pair quickly left the car and ran to find a cover. The water was approaching and the last option for both men was to scramble up the nearby trees. As soon as they reached them, the water swept away everything below them. It's hard to imagine the power of a tsunami unless you've experienced it. It's a destructive force that just engulfs and wipes out everything in its path. The tsunami quickly spread to other districts of the city and covered almost 5 square kilometers, which is 500 hectares, flooding almost 50% of the city. The Ishinomaki tsunami destroyed more than 50,000 houses and buildings, destroyed the vibrant city center and most of its port and infrastructure. Almost 3,100 people lost their life in the city. Mr. Honda did not come down from the pine tree until the next morning, March 12th. It looked like his city had been destroyed by an atomic bomb. Wading through the wreckage and dodging parts of wrecked boats washed ashore by the waves, it was a terrifying feeling. Half-collapsed buildings were submerged in water and he struggled to breathe the air, which was full of acrid smoke. When he arrived at the evacuation center at the school on elevated place, he found out his wife was alive because she had been evacuated in time. But overnight, they lost friends, their house, and indeed a part of the city that made up their lives. They will never forget this dark and terrifying day. The tsunami took almost everything from me, but the most valuable thing, our lives, was preserved. We take it as a new chance for a new life. Many of us were not so lucky. Mr. Honda concludes his life story. Today, the city is experiencing a real renaissance, and just like in other parts of Japan, renewal is happening on an accelerated pace. Although the traces of the tsunami are still visible, they are diminishing. After the experience of 2011, a system of sophisticated ramparts and breakwaters is being built around the entire city, with a height of up to 10 meters in the area of the harbor and the mouth of Old Kitakami River, which should contain even a wave the size of the one from 2011. We wish the residents to pass the next test and win against the elements this time, because as you know from our videos, it's not a question of if it will happen next time, but only when.
The diffraction of the waves around these islands caused the well-sheltered town of Ishinomaki to be severely damaged, and the wave took the most lives of any town affected by the disaster. As I mentioned in the introduction, the towns of Shiogama and Tagajo lie only a few kilometers south of Ishinomaki. At the end of this bay, a form of continuous conurbation of hundreds of thousands of people gradually linking up with the city of Sendai. The cities have a connection of industry and important ports, so let's show the course of the events. The existence of these islands that form the natural boundary of Matsushima Bay, the largest of which are Miyato Island and Sabusawa Island, proved crucial to the wave's further progress. If we look closely, we can see that the geomorphology of the coastline of these islands is very rugged, and there are many indented bays. In addition, there are relatively high forested hills on the islands. Thanks to these features, the islands were able to absorb a significant part of the tsunami energy in the area. If we look at this eastern beach of Miyato Island, you can see that behind the original breakwaters, the local development has been completely destroyed. This means that the wave run-up here must have been very destructive. This was not only due to the lack of height of the breakwaters, but also because the town behind it was built at the sea level. As a result, The water that overflowed the breakwater completely flooded this whole area and filled it like a huge swimming pool, washing away most of the buildings. This system of protection proved to be ill-conceived. But the Japanese engineers learned their lesson. First, they repaired the breakwaters and raised the height of the breakwater by 1.5 meters. Then they raised the entire area to the height of the breakwater, and only on this modified surface did they begin the construction. This is a very sophisticated measure. The next wave, if it overflows the breakwater again, will not have such destructive force, because the entire buildings will not be submerged in water, but the water will only lap them and quickly return to the ocean. As you can see, other places on the island have seen the construction of new breakwaters, some relying on height, others on sophisticated shapes. It is on the face of it fantastic when you consider whenever the Japanese are building new breakwaters, even on islands to protect the local flora and fauna. On some islands, you can still see the line of how far the water reached during the tsunami. Thanks to this natural wall of islands, only a relatively weak tsunami of churning water burned into Matsushima Bay and did minimal damage to the adjacent town of Takagi. Thanks to this fact, there was no need to take any measures on the shores of the Gulf to protect against tsunamis. The existing barriers have only been repaired and significant foaming has only occurred here at this point of this channel. The existing barriers have only been repaired and significant foaming has only occurred here at the point of this channel that connects the bay to the open area. Here, the barriers have been significantly improved. If I had to choose where to live on the east coast of Japan, it would be here. The risk of a deadly tsunami here is absolutely negligible. Unfortunately, this is not the case for the southern and southwestern parts of the bay, at the end of which lies the town of Shiogama. It is clear from the map that this part of the bay is much less protected and more exposed. This also resulted in a much greater power of the tsunami. Let's take a look at the perspective of this small island of Mitsushima. This is where the town of Shiogama is located. To the north are a number of islands that we've just talked about. And if we look to the east, we can see the open ocean. Therefore, the tsunami did not have any obstacles in this area. Its relatively high strength can be seen on this Mahashini island, where there were no protective features. As you can see, the local forest has been completely devastated. Nevertheless, even this series of islets served as a kind of buffer to the tsunami's energy, and the shallowness of the bay also played a role in its diminishing strength, which greatly inhibited the wave. When the wave reached the port, here at this place where the ship Eknarik is located, random witness was take the moment when the wave lifted the pier, boarding steps and ships, and finally flooded the surrounding infrastructure.
와, 기차, 기차. 야바이, 야바이.
A few hundred meters away, at the western end of the harbor itself, the arrival of the wave was filmed from the roof of the shopping center. The wave manifested itself as a sudden surge of water that overflowed the low concrete wall and secured the gate, and poured uncontrollably into the streets. The flooding of the street itself was subsequently filmed from this high-rise building near this commuter train line. Fortunately, the wave did not have sufficient energy, and so it only flooded the nearby area of the harbor to a height of 1.5 meters to 2 meters. While this caused quite serious damage to infrastructure, it was rather minor compared to other locations. The tsunami killed 12 people in Shiogama. The more southerly Tagajo was not so lucky. Its harbor is exposed to the open ocean, and so a massive wave swept over the city, manifesting itself as a massive and raging water of deluge that damaged a large number of buildings, infrastructure, and took dozens of lives. The area was flooded up to 1.5 kilometers inland. As you can see, the eyewitness footage speaks volumes. But the tsunami has still not shown its greatest destructive power here. The whole area south of Ishinomaki is flat, and there are long sandy beaches, and the bottom only rises gently to the shore. This bathymetry of the coastline has completely changed to the character of the tsunami, compared to the northern areas, which is fully reflected in the Sendai area, which we will discuss in the next video. It looked like a normal Friday. Mr. Okamoto was preparing for a trip to Sendai Airport, where he was due to pick up his wife, who was flying in from Tokyo, 300 kilometers away where she was working. The couple lived on the western edge of Sendai, in a quiet residential area surrounded by forested hills. The journey to the airport usually takes an hour, and as the plane was due to land shortly after 3:30 p.m., Mr. Okamoto set off after 2 p.m. As he drove through the town of Natori and past local farms, the road began to shake. The clock in the car read 2:46 p.m. and Mr. Okamoto realized that another earthquake which hits Japan several times a year had arrived and quickly stopped the car, precisely as he had learned to do. But he soon realized that this earthquake was different. The tremors intensified until the road jerked violently from side to side and cracked. It took an incredibly long time for the biggest tremors to stop. "Tsunami! Tsunami is coming soon," Mr. Okamoto said out loud. He quickly turned on the car radio and his intuition did not fail him. A monothematic warning of a major tsunami approaching Japan's shores poured into the airwaves. To his horror, he heard the information that the epicenter of the earthquake was directly opposite of the Sendai area, some 80 kilometers from the shore, and that the inhabitants must evacuate immediately. Initial estimates spoke of an earthquake magnitude of 8.9 on the Richter scale. Suddenly my legs went numb and I felt like I was in a bad dream. I couldn't move, my brain wasn't working, and honking cars passed me, gradually forming columns facing away from the sea. I told myself it was over, I was going to die here. But then something came loose and I just told myself I wanted to survive. The numbness subsided and I got into the car to get back to the town of Natori, which was only a few kilometers away. But there were a lot of cars everywhere and we drove slowly. I could feel the earth shaking again. And once again, the feelings of helplessness and despair fell upon me. But then suddenly everything went quiet. The motorcade stopped and a man got out of the car in front of me. I could see the horrified look on his face and how he was pointing his hand somewhere in the distance behind my car. I looked in the rear view mirror and what I saw was absolutely shocking. I instinctively got out of the car and saw a huge mass of debris hurtling towards the ocean about 2 kilometers away. There were remnants of buildings, cars, planes and other things. I saw no water, just a wall of debris from north to south, rolling towards us with a thundering sound, swallowing everything in its path. He sat instinctively in the car and waited for nothing. I pulled into the oncoming lane, which was empty, and drove away from the terrifying spectacle. I saw people running across the fields trying to escape this horrific destruction. I don't even know how, but I managed to reach the town of Natori to the evacuation platform. I stopped about 400 meters from it because I couldn't go any further. I jumped out of the car and ran. The wreckage was only a few dozen meters away. The terrifying screeching and cracking sound of the tsunami at my heels will stay in my head for the rest of my life. At the last moment, I ran to the evacuation platform and just watched as the tsunami engulfed everything around me. It seemed like the end of the world. Nothing will be the same here, I realized. While the city of Sendai, on the other hand, was exposed to the direct impact of the waves. With its million inhabitants, it was the largest city to be hit by the disaster. Unlike the northern areas, Sendai is situated on a large coastal plain and the coastline is flat and sandy. This coastal geomorphology was predestined because the tsunami would easily spread many kilometers inland. The bathymetry of the coastline is determined by the gradually sloping seabed, and the sea here is thus shallow for tens kilometers offshore. This is another major difference from northern areas where the bottom slopes rapidly and there is already great depth near the shore. The shallow sea means a major slowing down of the tsunami's speed, but on the other hand, also it uplifts into continuous walls of water. The wave approached Sendai in several stepped walls. This means that after each successive wave has passed, the ocean has remained uplifted a little higher. This resulted in a crashing blow to the coast. The wave has swept away Sendai Airport, where Mr. Okamoto was heading, at around 3:55 PM. The footage shows that the force of the water was enormous, taking planes, destroying buildings, and advancing easily inland. Its progress is notorious in the helicopter footage, which shows the sledge cars escaping the destruction and the water pushing buildings in front of them. Flooding fields, greenhouses, taking cars and trucks, and gradually turning into smoldering wall of debris, just as Mr. Okamoto described. The reason the water had such incredible power was that more and more waves were pushing against it, coming in series after series. Mr. Okamoto had about 20 minutes to save himself, because in that time the wave had swallowed up the town of Natori, which was completely uprooted. The water gradually flooded this entire coastal plain, causing incredible damage to property, health, and lives. The big problem was the water, due to the flat nature of the landscape, returned to the ocean very slowly and formed lagoons of dirty, toxic and smelly water in many places and took many months to drain. When we look at the current appearance of the coastline, the damage is still evident, with many fields still uncultivated due to the contamination from industrial floods. The force of water is also clearly visible in the coastline forests. Mr. Okamoto was eventually happily reunited with his wife after another week. Fortunately, their home was out of the reach of the devastating waves, and they had somewhere to return to. But many people were not so lucky. And then, Okamoto joined the volunteers and spent several weeks helping with the tsunami relief effort. His powerful story is a clear message about the destructiveness of nature, and that is not to be underestimated. The city of Soma lies on the very northern border of the Fukushima prefecture, and its harbor forms the natural southern edge of the flat Sendai Bay. From an altitude of 65 miles, we can see that the city and its harbor are loosely exposed to the epicenter of the undersea earthquake from where the deadly wave came. From this high, we can also comfortably see the cities of Onagawa, Minami Sanriku, and Kesanuma, which were virtually destroyed by the wave. But here it was completely different from the wave that came to Soma. This is due to the different bathymetry of the bottom and also the different character of the coastline. In the north, the ocean rises abruptly just before the coastline, which is also very rugged and there are numerous bays. The result is the notorious flood wave, which has enormous destructive potential. However, everything is different about the town of Soma. The ocean rises gently, and for many kilometers offshore, the water is refreshingly shallow, while the coastline is flat and sandy. As a result, tsunamis in such conditions tend to form classic walls of water as we know them from popular movies. Let's take a closer look. All the action in this video takes place in this small area around the harbor called Obama. The first camera is located roughly where these houses are. And that will be filming the area from the road bridge to the sand split in that direction. The second camera is located just a short distance from the road bridge. Approximately somewhere on this rock, which is a fairly safe place to watch the tsunami. In the beginning, the situation does not look dangerous and the man with the camera are calm, even though they realize that the water rushing past the pier is a sign of an approaching tsunami. This effect is caused by the slow rise of the water surface as the wave, whose crest is still in the open sea, pushes a huge mass of water in front of it. And therefore, the water begins to move towards the shore. It is being pushed out. Slow-moving water can be seen around other breakwaters and dikes. When we look out to the open sea, we see that it is perfectly calm, and the rise in the surface is imperceptible to large ships. Here we can see that people are still evacuating the port buildings, so it is only a few minutes after the earthquake. Only a few people realize what kind of disaster is coming. Here we see two fishing boats moving quite correctly out of the harbor, where they will be at risk of serious damage even during a small wave. But as we can see, they have not yet sailed out to the sea, because the first regular wave is coming in and crashing over the pier. At this point, the ships can't leave the harbor because of the strong current. The current is also clearly visible on camera 1 as the water breaks under the road bridge into this shallow bay called Matsukawa. The small strait under the road bridge is the only connection between the bay and the ocean, which is otherwise very well protected by this originally natural split, which has been reinforced and a road has been built over it to connect the harbor with areas further south. But let's go back to the harbor. Even though the water is starting to spill over the low concrete barrier, as the harbor bay is filled with the constantly flowing water, the men are still joking, thinking that the wave won't get much stronger. They are more amused by the situation than seriously worried. However, they soon realize that they were very wrong. As more and more water comes in, since the peak of the tsunami is already near the coast, the flow over the concrete wall picks up a speed and becomes more and more powerful. and the water quickly floods the harbor structures. Gradually, it dawns on the man that the situation is not okay and is instead very serious.
尋常じゃね
They will fully realize this when the second wave hits, and the warning sirens sound when the water floods all the buildings up to the first floor level. And it is obvious that the damage will be overwhelming.
マジか飲まれてる飲まれてる半端じゃねえほらほらほらトラック夢は大丈夫か
The second camera also recorded a significant increase in the currents into Matsukawa Bay. But it was at this point that the cameraman managed to catch a glimpse of a huge wall of water heading towards the spit at the end of the bay. The incoming crest of the main wave was also recorded by the second camera. At this point, the situation is critical because the ocean surface is up approximately 11 feet and surrounding all the buildings. And now the crest of the main wave is approaching and is at least another 20 feet in height before overtopping. It is therefore certain that the impact of the tsunami will be catastrophic. When a wave breaks on a shoal and hits a scythe, an incredible spectacle occurs. A huge overflowing cylinder full of foamy water is created, which crashes against the concrete and rock cobbles on the spit, reaching up to 30 meters high in places. Now we can truly say that we are seeing the destructiveness of the tsunami in its essential form. The major pine trees on the north side of the spit are immediately uprooted and washed away.
港屋の上の方がいいんじゃないかここでも
The second camera also shows the crest of the main wave coming in very clearly. When the wave breaks, it swallows one of the fishing boats, which disappears in the furious foam of this giant tsunami. The giant wave is also seen by the people in this building, who then try to take shelter somewhere. Many viewers thought for a long time that these people could not have survived, but the opposite is true. As we are about to show you, the wave then completes the work of destruction throughout the harbor.
全部飲んだみんな大丈夫 大丈夫かよ
In this video, which was taken from one of the tugboats, you can see the enormous force of the tsunami ripping a large tanker from a harbor crane and washing it away. In another video that was taken from this bridge over the harbor, you can see clearly how far the water reached. Here you can see the flooded harbor structures where the camera number 2 was,
健一さんとかじゃない？いきなり聞いてんだけど。まだ来てる、まだ来てる。いや、なんかあれ、なんかすごいですね、あれ。あれあれ。いや、成田あるよ。車かなんか、停電じゃね？それが落ちてきて。逃げたぞ。
And this is where you can see the survivors of this building calling for help from the roof. It sounds almost unbelievable, but they were incredibly lucky and probably smart because they were able to hide in a place where the wave didn't wash them away. There is another wave forming on the ocean behind, but it hasn't made much of an impact. A few months after the tsunami, the harbor looked like this. Here you can see the foundations of the buildings that were swept away. Here we can see the torso of a building whose roof survived and was subsequently demolished. In the end, all that was left standing was this massive concrete building. The 2022 footage shows that the harbor structures have now been fully restored. Looking at the site, it can be seen that the restoration work is still ongoing today and further reinforcing of the wall is taking place. Even though it was not very high, it protected this part of the city very well, because it was able to absorb a huge part of the tsunami energy. The destructive power of the wave is evidenced by this view, where even in 2023, the remnants of the pine trees can still be seen in the highest parts of this cliff over which the wave swept. The neighborhoods on the other side of the harbor were not so lucky, and for example, the 2011 images here show the remains of the foundations of the buildings that have been washed away. There has never been any rebuilding here, and there is only pleasant greenery and a protective wall on the right side to prevent the effects of the next tsunami. Even though the tsunami's destructiveness here was not of the same magnitude as in the north, and the port infrastructure and adjacent buildings were mainly destroyed, the tsunami footage from this town, or rather video footage, is a perfect study that reveals a lot about this phenomenon. For this video, that is it. If you like this type of exploration of particular areas, be sure to give it a like, subscribe and hit that notification bell. And next time we can take a closer look at some other area.